Hello, my name is Jerrad Wyche, and welcome back to the Controlled Interests Gamecast. It's been nearly 3 years since our last episode. Life events and responsibilities got in the way of making this show the last 3 years, but we're back. Well, I'm back. Dominic Orlando, my co host, will be returning as my weekly partner in crime, but for the time being, I'll be going solo, hopefully with guests coming in throughout the year. I really miss doing a weekly podcast, and it feels nice returning to a comfort hobby of mine. Speaking of podcasts, I recently launched my monthly Pokemon interview podcast, The Very Best. The first episode is on YouTube and podcast services, featuring Max Roberts from the Max Frequency podcast and co-host of Chapter Select. Please check it out if you can. I'm really proud of how it turned out. And you can find me as well as Controlled Interests on Blue Sky, now that everybody's kind of migrated over from Twitter. So check us out, link in the description. Everything will be linked in the description below, including the first episode of The Very Best podcast. Now, I was wondering what I wanted to talk about on my first episode back. I was thinking about maybe doing predictions for 2026. I was thinking of possibly doing a couple of other things. But since it was just me running solo, I figured that maybe the best thing I can do on my first podcast back is talk about the most anticipated games for me of 2026. Now, I'm not looking at this from the perspective of the industry. I'm not trying to figure out what are going to be the 10 games that most people are going to be buzzing about by this time in December. I want to talk about what matters to me. And the way I tackled this list is I have 10 games total, and I wanted to go at it from a perspective of 5 indie games and 5 AAA games. Because I wanted to kind of pay homage to both of those things, especially now in the current age where indie games are doing a lot of the heavy lifting as development cycles and layoffs really hammer the AAA space and the gaming space in general. I really believe that indie games have been pivotal and the pillars of the community. We're also talking about games possibly going to $80, and these indie games have a way of filling those smaller price points for people who maybe can't afford to do Game Pass every month, who maybe can't afford a new $70 or $80 game. God forbid GTA 6 tries to test the market even higher than that. So I wanted to pay love to both. So we're going to be going back and forth. I'll start with an indie game, go to a AAA, and I just want to shine a light on obviously some of the major hitters coming this year from various studios we're looking to see follow-ups for, and some smaller indie titles that I think you may know about, you may not know about, but they all have me excited, and I can't wait to play them. Fingers crossed that they do all come out in 2026. Well, I will say, up at the top, I just mentioned GTA 6. I do not believe that game is coming out this year. I believe that Rockstar is going to end up delaying it into next year. So even if it ends up coming out this year, wasn't my most anticipated. I'm not a big Grand Theft Auto guy. I enjoyed the narrative for GTA 5 quite a bit. The multiplayer kind of lost me. The driving isn't always great. The shooting mechanics, I think that's a big point of contention for me with the GTA games, is that I think a lot of the moment-to-moment gameplay isn't up to par to what the rest of the game really showcases for the amount of production quality they put into it. And I do think that this GTA needs to have upgraded gameplay systems. But we'll see. Obviously, that's a discussion for another time. With GTA out of the way, hopefully for a lot of these games at the end of the year, I want to get into my most anticipated games of 2026. First off, I want to take a look at Fate's End. If you're not familiar with At Fate's End, it's from developer Thunder Lotus, who made Spiritfarer, which was one of my favorite games the year that came out. At Fate's End is a little different. It's a 2D action adventure, a lot more focus on gameplay, active gameplay that is, and it's set to release here in 2026. The studio, Thunder Lotus, they know how to tell an emotionally engaging story, so I think that, at the very least, is an easy walk through the door for me of I know that At Fate's End is going to have an emotionally engaging story, and we kind of saw that in its debut trailer. Spiritfarer was focused on the trauma and grief tied to death and guiding these lost souls to the afterlife. With At Fate's End, it's a familial clash. You're going to be going up against your siblings. Your upgrade tree is actually your family tree, which I think is really neat, and a way to tie in the narrative to the gameplay mechanics. Gorgeous art style. If it's anything like Spiritfarer, and we saw a little bit of this in the debut trailer, the music is going to be awesome. The art style itself, beautiful. Spiritfarer had this elegant nature about itself. This one has the same, but you can tell there's a little bit more brutality to the overall art style because it's a little bit more active and violent in the story it's telling, whereas Spiritfarer was a little bit more passive. I do think the relationships between characters is going to be put on focus, just like it was in Spiritfarer. I'm very curious to see how the gameplay evolves for Thunder Lotus because they are tackling, though it is a 2D game, the gameplay is very different from Spiritfarer. But I do think this has a chance, if it hits the way I think it can hit, of being a Blueprints, an And Roger, an indie game that kind of comes out of nowhere, unless you're the people that know and played Spiritfarer and know how special the studio can be, that really captures a lot of people's hearts. And I'm very curious to see what the overall playtime is, because to me, this is probably going to be at most like a 12-hour experience. I can't see it lasting much longer than that. And that's very digestible in today's day and age in the gaming space. So fingers crossed it comes out this year. It's loosely slated for 2026, which we know that can mean a multitude of things. It can mean it could get delayed. So who knows? But At Fate's End, I think, is one to keep on your radar because I think it has a chance to do something really special. And Spiritfarer, if you haven't played it, I highly suggest to go check it out. It is emotionally impactful in the best and worst of ways. And make sure you have a box of tissues with you. Next up, I want to talk about Forza Horizon 6. This is coming from Playground Games, who has 2 major releases coming out this year. Fingers crossed they do come out. It's set to release on May 19th, 2026. We just saw more of the game. It's full-on reveal, actually, at the Developer Direct that Xbox held here in January. I am not a car guy. I am not a racing guy. I have no interest in any of them. But every time a Forza Horizon game comes out, I play it immediately. And it's because the worlds are wonderfully realized. The countries they decide to go to, the care and the detail that they put into making the experience feel unique to whatever the culture is and the landscape is of the place they're going to. Forza Horizon 5, Mexico was awesome. The events, the cars, the visual fidelity is unmatched. This game is taking place in Japan, so automatically you have car people who are going to be interested in it because it's a new Horizon title. You have people like me who love Japan. It's this might be the first game that we see specifically on the Xbox, maybe even on the PlayStation, depending on how the port is. It's going to be coming later this year. It's not coming day and date with the Xbox and PC release on May 19th. That really justifies these consoles that we've had. There's conversations going on right now about when is the next, console generation going to happen? With all of the prices for RAM and computer parts and all of this stuff skyrocketing, are these companies going to partially delay their upcoming releases of their consoles? Instead of it being a 7-year cycle, are going to be closer to 10 because people can't really justify spending so much money on a console. We have the upcoming Steam machines that aren't priced yet that are rumored at the low end of being $750. And I know it's more apples to oranges, but these next gen consoles could be up there, and the current state of especially the American economy isn't in a place where I think these studios and these manufacturers can justify it in the same way they could before. Also bringing in the fact that a lot of people who own the PS5 and Xbox Series X and obviously the Nintendo Switch 2 that just came out don't feel as if their consoles have been fully realized by developers and the platform holders to justify their existence yet. And I'm curious to see where that goes. All that being said, going back to the original point of this, Forza Horizon 6 is going to be a showpiece title. It has a very good chance of being in the Game of the Year conversations, which is incredible for a racing game. And I think, like I've mentioned, this is a type of racing game that gets people in who aren't car people, who aren't racing people who just want to check out the Japanese landscape in a highly detailed and high visual fidelity world. And I do feel that this game is going to be an event release. I think people are going to be talking about it. And if the PlayStation 5 port ends up coming out and hitting in 2026 as well, that'll be a nice bump right before the Game of the Year conversations to reinvigorate the love for this title. And I do think it'll even add to its, like I said, potential to win Game of the Year or at least be in the conversation, which that alone for a racing title would be a phenomenal step. Next up, the second indie title on this list, Mixtape. This comes from developer Beethoven and Dinosaur, and I am personally ashamed to say, as much as I wanted to play this game, it's on my backlog. I haven't got a chance to get to it. The Artful Escape. I know it received positive and negative reviews, mostly middling if I'm being honest, but I love what it did as a piece of art. And Mixtape is interesting because obviously it was set to release, people assumed and expected it to release in 2025, and it slipped to 2026. And recently, a lot of these coming-of-age tales haven't been hitting with audiences. We had Lost Record, Bloom and Rage, which is a little bit of a letdown for people. Stranger Things, mixed opinions on the final season. And Life is Strange, which is coming back with the third Life is Strange 3, which there's a whole lot to unpack in that by itself. I'm just really hoping that Mixtape hits, because coming-of-age tales, when done right, are so impactful. The art style in this, the way they're handling the frame rate of the game, I just think has the makings of something special. For those a little bit on the older side, or maybe a little bit more cultured if you're younger, it gives me a lot of Freaks and Geeks and Dazed and Confused vibes in the best of ways, and it doesn't really feel like we get a whole lot of that, at least done super well. And we're in a point where I think we could use something like this that's a little different. And like I said before, a coming-of-age tale that hits. I hope it comes out this year. I can't see them delaying again outside of 2026. Even if this game hits at like a swimming in sevens, I will still appreciate its existence because it is something different. And I just can't wait to see what this narrative is like, and if there's any twists and surprises, and how it marries its gameplay into the narrative and how seamless that is. The soundtrack is going to be killer. I guarantee it'll probably be on list for the best soundtrack of the year. With both original and licensed music, I think it has a chance to do something really special in that space. I think The Artful Escape also did a lot with its soundtrack. And like I said, forgive me, I haven't played it yet. I want to. It's on my backlog of shame. But from what I've heard, I think Beethoven and Dinosaur is a developer that's trying some cool stuff. And, I think that maybe The Artful Escape was their experimental phase, and now they're getting into how to tighten up the bolts on how to deliver a gaming experience that is a little bit better critically received. But at the end of the day, when you're creating art, you're not creating something that is meant to be critically well received. That's more on the capitalist side of things. You just want to deliver the thing you want to deliver and see how people engage with it. And at the end of the day, people may hate your thing, people may love your thing, but the worst thing it can be is a non-reaction, right? So we'll see what happens. I'm very excited to play Mixtape, and like with everything we're probably going to be talking about today, here's hoping it comes out this year. Gears of War E-Day is an interesting thing for me because obviously this is coming from the Coalition, who I'm assuming is hard at work on the next iteration of what the Gears franchise is going to be, or maybe a new IP. Some rumors have suggested that. Out of all of the major Xbox titles releasing this year, I feel that this one has the greatest chance to slip. I know people feel that way about Fable, which we'll talk about later. That is on the list, spoiler alert. But with Gears of War E-Day, I don't know. We've had the television show or movie, I don't even know what it is at this point, that's been rumored for years on Netflix and other streaming platforms. And Gears of War as a franchise is in a weird place. I do think that doing this prequel is a very clever way to re-engage with the Gears fandom. I think that after the sequel trilogy, the Coalition kind of learned that maybe the audience was so attached to that original cast that introducing a new cast wouldn't hit the same way. I know that also with the gameplay changes they did, people weren't super thrilled with that. I've never been super attached to the multiplayer side of Gears. It's always been a single player and co-op thing for me, playing through the story with my best friend Daniel. And funny enough, we played through Gears of War Reloaded, the remaster that came out last year, and it really reinvigorated my love for the Gears of War franchise. And I'm very excited for this. And we already have plans, if it comes out this year or when it does come out, to play through this with each other. And, we're older now, we're in our 30s. We don't have all the time in the world to play games with one another, but we do carve out time to have these experiences. Even if it's for 2 hours on a random Friday, we try to play something together. And it's been really fun. And it's, as you get older, you need to make excuses to spend time with people. This podcast being one of them, it's a great way for me to invite on friends and just get to talk with them for an hour about a hobby we both love. And playing games with my friend Daniel, we've been doing it for, 30 years at this point, is amazing. We played, last year we played through Gears of War Reloaded, Pico Park 2, and numerous other titles. And this is going to be such a nostalgic blast, and there's going to be stakes on it because I'm playing with my best friend. And all that being said, I do think since it's a prequel, it has a chance to hit a lot better critically because it has the characters people love. It's a contained story. We know the point in which it's getting to. And it's going to be more streamlined and feel more like classic Gears of War in the best of ways. Multiplayer, like I said, I can't speak to that. I know people have expectations of what they want from Gears of War multiplayer. I am not that guy. It's just never been my bag with the franchise. But I do think that Gears of War E-Day can be, like I said before, a true return to form for the series, which it needs because Halo's on, thin ice. We have the Halo 1 remake coming out later this year, which is just a single player, which is such an odd decision. But yeah, Gears of War E-Day is the next game on my most anticipated list. Next up, the third indie game, Planet of Lana 2. This is coming from developer Wishfully. It's a puzzle platformer. Planet of Lana is a game that I had on my list, on my backlog for years, and I eventually got to it, and it is such a beautifully realized proof of concept for this developer. It blends brutalist science fiction with wonderfully mysterious and powerful parts of nature. It has a cute companion that helps you solve these puzzles. There is no actual voice acting or dialogue, which I think adds to the environmental storytelling and the emotional impact of the narrative arcs that go throughout this game. I can't wait to see how they expand on both their narrative and gameplay systems. Like I said, I'm not saying that disparagingly. I do believe that the first game was a proof of concept. I think they were trying to showcase what they can do in the space. I think they showed that artistically and visually they can hang with anybody. In a lot of ways, it reminds me of Moon Studios with Ori and the Blind Forest. Obviously, different types of games. That's a Metroidvania. This is a puzzle platformer. But the jump there from Ori 1 to Ori 2 was a refinement, right? They didn't actually go out of their way to make it a wholly new game. They just kind of leaned into the parts of the first that people loved, albeit that game, the sequel to Ori, had some performance issues. But all that being said, I do think that it took a lot of those gameplay elements from the first and really tuned them finely. And with Planet of Lana 2, I'm very curious to see where they take it because the ending of the first game, no spoilers, leaves the narrative in a place where they can go a number of ways. It doesn't have to be as overbearingly dystopian as that first game felt. It could go in a more positive direction. I'm interested to see who the companion is, if it's the same companion, if it's a different creature of some sort, if it's the same character that's grown up at this point as an adult, or maybe it's their child. I haven't actually paid too much attention to the trailer. I've kind of been going media blackout. The most I'll see of this trailer is when I'm editing this and putting it on the YouTube version of this podcast, so by then I'll have a better understanding. But I've been trying to do media blackout for this game because I really enjoyed the first one, even though I came to it late last year, and really curious to see where Wishfully can take this series. Maybe they're doing a trilogy, maybe it's only 2 games, but they're an indie studio. I have a magnifying glass on because I want to see where they go and what they do. Next up, Control Resonant. This is from developer Remedy. slated for 2026. I personally believe it's probably going to come in the middle of the year, between maybe May and August, somewhere in that time frame. You know, when I was thinking about what I wanted from a Control sequel, if you would have asked me before this game was announced, I'd be like, well, yeah, of course, I want Jessie to be the main character. I want them to iterate on the gun that she uses, the weapon, and have me explore the oldest house once again. Maybe new rooms unlocked, maybe new passages, something going on there. Alan Wake 2 was phenomenal in the way they delivered that in a non-traditional fashion in terms of the narrative. And I do think they're going to play a little bit with this here. The sequel isn't the same, right? It isn't a third-person action RPG. This is more of a hack and slash action RPG, similar to like a Souls-like. You're not playing as Jesse, you're playing as Dylan Faden, which the fake out in the trailer was brilliant with having him have longer hair, so it looked like Jesse was checking up on him. I hope that this game kills it critically and commercially. I'm very worried about Remedy's long-term sustainability. I mean, heck, the way the video game industry is going these days, we should be worried about any developer's long-term sustainability. Between the layoffs and the investments from questionable places, such as Saudi Arabia, it's tough to see which companies will be around 5 years from now, let alone a year from now. Who knows? But to get the bummer talk out of the way, Control Resident, I'm very excited for. I'm glad that it's an actual sequel. When the title came up, I was like, oh, is this like a spin-off? And then you hear that it's a different genre with a brother, and I was still curious, hey, maybe this is a smaller experience that they're tackling while they're working on Control 2. No, it's been confirmed since then that this is the sequel. This is a major release for Remedy. I am curious to see how this game resonates with the Remedy-verse fandom. Obviously, Alan Wake is much more survival horror. Control is shades of that, but it's much more an action RPG. This is going in the Souls-like direction, which I know for every person like me, there are dozens of people who do not like that genre and they find it abrasive and difficult and they bounce off of it. And it's just because people enjoy different things. And I'm curious to see if this is a hack and slash in the way that changes up the gameplay, but not necessarily the difficulty approach, which I'm assuming it will because Remedy has been pretty good about accessibility in their games. Or if it is more difficult and a lot of people who would be interested in it bounce up. The other aspect of this is that because it could be more of a Souls-like, that can bring in a way bigger audience for Remedy and the Remedy-verse. And with the success of Elden Ring and Night Rain, and we have Duskbloods on the horizon, and whatever the next game is after that, people love their Souls-likes, especially when they're done well. Shout out Liza P. What a fantastic game. If this is that, and Remedy does it well, which they're a very good developer, and they can hit quality benchmarks that people expect out of the AAA space, I do think that this can deliver commercially. I'm hoping. Like I said, I'm very worried for Remedy's long-term sustainability. They're a bunch of weirdos in the best of ways, and sometimes that doesn't lead to cash flow and financial success, unfortunately, in the world we live in the capitalist-focused society that we decide to interact with on a day-to-day basis. So we'll see. Control Resident, in terms of release date, that also, I would imagine, is, if I was a betting man, I would say closer to May, June than it is August, but who knows? Remedy gives me fall vibes, and I don't know why. I couldn't really explain it to you fully. Maybe it's just because Alan Wake takes place in the Pacific Northwest, and they often have a lot of like rain and wind and stuff in their games, but they've always felt to me like a fall studio, but who knows? I'd love to dive into this in the summer if we have to. Next up, on the indie game space, we have Reanimal. Earlier I was talking about how Planet of Lana 2 from Wishfully is going to be the follow-up, and I'm curious to see where they take that. Tarsier Studios, who developed Little Nightmares 1 and 2, didn't get the chance to do that with the third game, which came out to not so great reviews. Reanimal, on the other hand, is set to release in just a few weeks from the day this episode goes live, day before Valentine's Day, February 13th, 2026. With Little Nightmares 3 being a letdown, wasn't developed by Tarsier Studios, fans are really hoping, me included, that this studio is able to strike lightning once again with a new franchise that's a spiritual successor to Little Nightmares. I am very, very cautious about the co-op of this game. How different will it play solo versus co-op? I'm likely going to be playing this by myself. I don't really have anybody who's interested in these type of games to go co-op, or people that have time to do so. So I'm very intrigued to see if the AI will be functional and will not push back on solo players, and if it'll feel just as good of an experience, or is the intended way and the best way to play this playing co-op with two people controlling each of the little characters. You know, I'm confident that this game will be good. Tarsier Studios' Little Nightmares 1 was good. Little Nightmares 2 was good. I am just wondering if it'll hit the mark like Little Nightmares did back in 2017. That captured the hearts of horror fans in a special way, and it's why they were able to make the second game, and it's why, unfortunately, the people who own the rights to Little Nightmares were able to make the third game. It just caught fire. People loved it. People loved the little weird claymation weirdos. Say weirdos one more time in that sentence. I just don't know if Reanimal will do the same. It's coming out early in the year, so there's not a whole lot of competition. It comes out 2 weeks before Resident Evil Requiem, which I think is good. It gives people enough time. People who are craving horror can't wait for Resident Evil Requiem. They have this to check out, and it won't be at a crazy price point either. Reanimal has a chance for me personally to be on my top 10 game list at the end of the year, as any of these games I've talked about this year. And I do think Tarsier Studios is feeling a little salty and a little petty that they weren't able to do their third game in the trilogy of the series that they created. And I think they kind of wanted to deliver and be like, hey, we're the ones who made Little Nightmares what it is, deservedly so. Here's our new series, Reanimal. We're delivering the same grotesque, funky world that you came to love with Little Nightmares, but in a different package, a spiritual successor of sorts. So we'll see what happens there with Reanimal. Okay, we're about to head into the final 3 games of my most anticipated list for games coming out in 2026. Before we do so, please, if you're listening on podcast services, head over to Blue Sky and search up jerradw.bluesky.social, jerradw.bsky.social, and send me a tweet letting me know what games you're highly anticipating this year. If you're listening to this on YouTube, leave a comment down below. I'm curious to see if any of these games are on your most anticipated list. If you have games that I haven't heard of, or maybe I just didn't list this time around, please leave a comment and I'll reply. And I'm curious to see what everyone is looking forward to in the coming year. The first of the final 3 of my top 10 most anticipated games for this year is Marvel's Wolverine. This is coming from developer Insomniac Games. Obviously, they do the Spider-Man titles, Ratchet and Clank. They are, I think, Sony's most invaluable studio. Obviously, Sony Santa Monica and Naughty Dog deliver the highest highs for PlayStation, but Insomniac Games is that role player that delivers consistently on a night in, night out basis. Their release cadence is unmatched by anybody at Sony. Them and Obsidian Entertainment for Xbox are the two that I think are phenomenal at their cadence and quality, and marrying those two things together in a way that no one else does in the industry. This game is set for the second half, we all assume, of 2026. You know, Insomniac has shown that they have a detailed perspective and appreciation for Marvel as a franchise, so I'm excited to see the fleshed out mutant world they'll be delivering. Spider-Man 1 and 2 and Miles Morales do a great job of fleshing out the Spider-Man world, and we have hints at Black Panther and other characters, the Avengers, but I do think I can't be the only Marvel fan out there, and we're probably going to see this in the film part in the MCU. people are just thirsty for good X-Men content. X-Men is such a huge pillar of the Marvel franchise, and because of the weird ownership stuff with Fox, we've gotten the Fox movies, but we haven't really gotten other stuff. Like X-Men wasn't included in a lot of Marvel official merchandising for years because they just didn't want to give money to Fox in that way. And now that they own the X-Men again, we're seeing it through the release of Lego minifigures and other things. X-Men 97 coming back. And I do think that we're in a place now where we need to start seeing quality X-Men games. We had, Marvel Cosmic Invasion, which came out last year and featured some X-Men characters, but we have yet to see a true X-Men game. And, Marvel's Wolverine probably won't be that. It'll be a Logan story, but give me parts of that world. Show me other mutants. We've got them teased. We had Mystique in the trailer. I'm trying to think of who else we saw. We saw Omega Red. I just want it to feel like a mutant story. I just want it to be fleshed out, please. I'm curious to see what the emotional narrative beats of this will be, and this kind of goes into my next part. I really hope we get flashbacks to other points in Logan's life. World War II, maybe the founding of the X Academy, maybe meeting Professor X, Xavier. I don't know. We're going to be plopped into the middle of this Wolverine's overall story. And in order to have the emotional stakes, I wonder if their choice will be a character who lives as long as he does. Maybe we will flash back to him getting the adamantium, fighting in World War II, like I mentioned previously, meeting certain other mutants or characters in the world of X-Men. I don't know if we'll get any really nods to Spider-Man. I mean, we'll get something small because it is Insomniac, but I doubt we're going to see Peter Parker. We're going to see Miles Morales. It might be like a post-game thing, but even then, I don't know if they want to attach these things that closely. I think they'll have a nod of like, yeah, this exists in the same world, but we're not going to have a crossover game by any means. And I don't think we need that. I think they can exist in their own parts, and this is Insomniac's chance to deliver X-Men and Wolverine and really do it the due justice it deserves, because like I said before, the world deserves more good X-Men, and outside of the comic space, we haven't really been getting that for the last decade or so. So outside of, X-Men 97, one of the best animated shows out there. I hope this game is good. I think it'll be good. I have faith in Insomniac Games. I'm more curious about the gameplay differences, the melee combat, traversing the world, the emotional narrative beats like I talked about, and the attachment to the Spider-Man series of games and how closely or far out those will be spaced in terms of direct connection. Mina the Hollower, the last indie game on this list, comes from Yacht Club Games. It's a 2D action adventure platformer, 2026, hopefully, the release date. This game was slated to come out in October of last year, 2025, but was indefinitely delayed. Take your time, no worries. Shovel Knight for me is a top 10 game of all time. I absolutely adore Shovel Knight. All of the spin-off smaller titles I've liked to various degrees, but the original Shovel Knight was such a special experience for me. The genre for Mina the Hollower has me a bit hesitant. I'm not somebody who flocks towards Zelda likes. It's a genre that I don't always click with. Unlike with Shovel Knight, I'm an easy mark for a 2D platformer or Metroidvania. It might not come out this year, and I wonder if it being perceived as the first quote-unquote major follow-up to Shovel Knight has Yacht Club Games being extra careful. They're following up on a game that was loved by so many that everyone felt was so special. And like I previously mentioned, they've had other games come out in that time, and they've published other games that they didn't develop themselves. And I do wonder if it's a nerves thing, if it's meeting expectations. We had the story last year about how Team Cherry had development heaven with Hollow Knight Silksong, and they took their time because they wanted to. And I hope Yacht Club Games feels that same way, and they're not crunching and pressuring because they have this standard they need to meet, and I hope they take all the time in the world. If it delays out of this year, 2026, I feel, and they feel it still needs work, I hope they find a path forward that lands them in a clear path to release. Um, the Mina the Hollower has a chance to be the follow up everyone expects it to be for what Shovel Knight did. Obviously, different genre, but man, it looks like it has the sauce. You watch that trailer, like, oh, Yacht Club Games knows how to take these classic video game genres and put them in the modern age and make them feel classic and nostalgic, but also feel, like I said, modern at the same time. I do think it comes out this year if I was a betting man, and I can't wait to get my hands on it. If it's as special as Shovel Knight was, I think we're all going to have a real treat on our hands. And even if it isn't, I think getting that monkey off their back of, the first major release after Shovel Knight will do a lot for Yacht Club Games. And financially, I'm curious to see where they're at, because they have had a lot of these smaller titles, and maybe they do need to have a big major hit to sustain the company moving forward. Yacht Club Games had Shovel Knight kind of financially stabilize them for the last, 10 years or so. And maybe they're in a place now where they need another hit. And maybe Mina the Hollow will be that. But I'm very excited to check it out when and if it comes out this year. Lastly, my most anticipated game. And funny enough, if you had asked me maybe 10 days ago, this wouldn't have been my number one. Probably would have still been on the list, but it wouldn't have been the number one game. And that is Fable from Playground Games. Also releasing Forza Horizon 6 in 2026, which is crazy. The developer direct the Xbox had late in January showcased how much care and craftsmanship is going into the reboot of this beloved series. The original trilogy played a major role in my personal video game journey. I think the morality and choice-based systems was a big part of my initial interest in the Mass Effect trilogy. I love sci-fi, obviously, but seeing that was the pull of those games and having experience with Fable, I'm like, wow, you're marrying one of my favorite genres, science fiction, with one of my favorite RPG styles, which is like morality, choice-based stuff. And I think that kind of, without Fable, I don't know if I would have picked up and played Mass Effect, which is crazy to think about because Mass Effect 2 is my favorite game of all time. It's funny how that domino effect happens. It looks to deliver a fantasy world that's more focused on the folk fairy tale side of things instead of pure high fantasy, which I think is a smart move. So it stands apart from Elder Scrolls and Witcher and these other, you have Crimson Desert, I can go on and on. Leaning on that, leans into the British humor, the comedy, I think not taking itself too seriously, which we see far too often in both the Western RPG and video game space as a whole. There's not a whole lot of funny video games that come out, and I think that's partly why people miss Fable. Obviously, it's the choice-based morality stuff and kicking chickens and owning a house and marrying and having kids, but it's also just the comedy. We're in a time now where everyone wants to laugh, and we deserve to laugh and take a brief respite from everything going on in the world, and I do think that Fable has a chance to do that. It could slip out of 2026, as any game on this list could, but it does feel like Xbox really wants it to hit this to be like the major fall-winter marketing piece. I think on record, every game that's come out in a developer direct has landed the year it was marked to come out. That being said, it is weird that, Fable and Beast of Reincarnation had like loose release dates. They didn't have specific release dates, or Kiln either, I believe, from Double Fine Productions. So it could still very well slip, but fingers crossed it doesn't. I think GTA, likely in my opinion, getting delayed gives this enough space to exist on its own. I want to see more of the world, though, via an uncut gameplay segment. I want to see you traversing. We saw a little glimpse of it, of the main character riding their horse and getting a beautiful display of a castle. I want to see you going through these worlds, riding through the hay, active combat in areas that aren't just seem like a battle arena. There's a lot more I want to see of the game. I'm sold on it completely, but I just want to see more. I'm curious if it'll feature fun cosmetic items that pay homage to the rest of Xbox's catalog or gaming in general. Here's hoping it's not all tied to microtransactions. I think that'll be a not a good position for Microsoft and Playground to take with this. Fable has a chance to establish itself as a major franchise 20 years later. I'm just hoping they nail it. With Halo and Gears of War on shaky legs, for better or worse, and deservedly so in some cases, Xbox needs a major win, and Fable can be their big new franchise. And I put new in quotation marks. Obviously, we all know the classic trilogy, but to, and this is a tough thing to say to older gamers, to a couple of generations of people playing video games, Fable isn't a thing. They've maybe heard somebody talk about the original trilogy, and to them it's no different than the original Super Mario Brothers game. Like, it's just nothing to them, right? Which is a bummer, because it holds a special place in a lot of our hearts, and it did a lot of special things. But, you know, we live in a what have you done for me lately world. We haven't really gotten fully fledged out remakes in an impressive way, in my opinion, modern remakes of the original trilogy. And I think this is a way for them to deliver something that is wholly unique, but at the same time, wholly classic Fable. And I can't wait to get my hands on it. I'm itching for this type of game, and I really hope it delivers. Playground Games has done a tremendous job with the Forza Horizon series, and they deserve to branch out and try something quote-unquote new. And another part that they didn't really show off was like a weather system or a seasonal thing. I think they have a chance to nail that incredibly well if you're familiar with the Horizon weather and season system at all. Yeah, I think that concludes my most anticipated games for 2026. As I talked about at the beginning of the show, for the short foreseeable future, I will be hosting the show by myself, hopefully with the guest as often as I can get them. And Dom will be back in the fold sooner rather than later. I appreciate anybody who's come back to listen to this podcast. Controlled Interest Gamecast has always been something special to me. In March, we'll be coming up on our 10-year anniversary, and I have some things on the back burner that I'm trying to get worked out to do something special for that 10-year anniversary. Whether you're coming back as an old follower and listener, or you're listening to me for the first time, I hope you appreciate me talking about video games. I hope you interact and whether comment on YouTube or maybe just shooting me a reply on Blue Sky if you can. Please know that I welcome and enjoy and appreciate anybody and everybody who takes the time to listen. I'm just glad to be back talking about video games on a weekly basis. Next week, I'll have things a little bit more ironed out. But before we go, obviously you can subscribe to Controlled Interests on YouTube. We are on Spotify and Apple Podcasts at Controlled Interest Gamecast. On Blue Sky, you can find me at jerradw.bsky.social. That's jerradw.bluesky.social. jerradw.bsky.social. If you just search my name, Jerrad Wyche, I'll pop up. I have a yellow avatar, clear as day. You can find me. And if you want to follow the podcast specifically on Blue Sky, that is at cipod.bluesky.social, cipod.bsky.social, Blue Sky. Just look up Controlled Interests, will pop up there as well. Anyways, I will catch you guys next week. Enjoy 2026 and beyond. Thank you for listening. Bye.